Good morning, everyone. Good morning, and welcome all of you in the audience, and welcome those listening via the internet. I know it's not on the agenda, but let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, and let's pause to remember the events that occurred on this day 75 years ago, where so many soldiers from the Allied forces lost their lives on this particular day. We had nearly 2,500 American soldiers lose their lives as they demonstrated the courage and the sacrifice that makes us all so proud to be Americans. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Once again, good evening, and we have a distinguished panel here in front of us this morning. And we're anxious to get started and learn a little more about our capital budget and five-year work program. Ms. Muller, should I turn it over to you?
Yes,
and then I ask each of you, before you speak, to introduce yourselves and in your title, so people listening via the internet know who you are. Thank you, and good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and board members. And this morning I'm Deb Muller, Chief Financial Officer, and we do have some guests with us as well. We have our bond counsel, well, I should go left to right, so let me start over. Our financial advisor, Mr. Jay Glover, and then to his right, our bond counsel, Mr. Attorney Ken Arden, and we have our Director of Facilities Planning, Ms. Sarah Lee Morrissey, with us. So this morning, we are going to talk about our capital budget and five-year work plan. What we will start off with is some information regarding a Senate bill that was passed into law this year and has an effect on our capital work program as well as any financing that we may do. And then we bring you some scenarios which you requested for a possible financial bond for our capital project, and then we will start talking about the budget and the work plan itself.
Sounds like a lot, so
yes.
Let's go.
So we'll turn it over to Mr. Arden first.
Good morning. Ken Arden, Bryant Miller Olive, serving as your bond counsel on potential financing if you guys decide to take that direction. We have all been struggling, we being all school districts in this state, with something called cost per student station limitations for years, which has basically shut down financings of new schools for many school districts. With the passage of the new law, the requirements with respect to cost per student station have basically been neutralized. If you choose to finance student stations pursuant to a lease purchase program, you are not subject to those requirements anymore. And what this means is basically you have a lease purchase program that has been in place for years, and it's pursuant to which you issue your certificates of participation, typically payable from your 1.5 mils or LCIF money, but most importantly, your lease purchase program can also be paid for with sales tax revenue. So that's one of the critical things here. So long as we wrap the financing in a lease purchase program, we don't need to deal with the cost per student station limitation. In addition, one of the other requirements that we've been struggling with over the years is the SREF construction standards. Those are also set to the side so long as you currently meet your shelter requirements in the event of hurricanes. So that allows you to tailor your class sizes more to what your individual needs are. Both of those things are huge improvements for us at this point in time if you choose to basically finance your school. So those gates are open, and we can talk about financing today without those worries. Jay?
Perfect, thanks. Jay Glover, Managing Director at Public Financial Management, and I'm going to be proactive today and drop in a throat lozenge if you all don't mind, because I've, as Ms. Wright knows, when I start talking, I get into a coughing fit at the tail end of a cold. So I apologize for having this in my mouth in the beginning, but.
Ms. Haynes, I'm sure, can empathize a little bit with you. She's been dealing with it for a week now.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I think the cold is gone, but the cough is still with me. So, again, Jay Glover. I've been before you a number of times. You know, going back to 2016 when we initially did a $40 million financing to get the sales tax program kick-started. And then subsequent to that, we've come back a few times as we talk about the capital budget to look at various bonding options and compare those to pay-as-you-go. So on page 7, which I think you all have seen before, it talks about some of the pros and cons in terms of bonding versus pay-as-you-go. I won't walk through all of those, but I think the two to focus on really as we think about this is one, obviously bonding involves an element of paying interest on any financing you do. And obviously that interest cost would be diverted from, you know, various projects you might use. So anytime you finance something, you're always going to pay an interest cost. And there's things we can do, which we'll talk about during this presentation, to help minimize that interest cost. On the other hand, pay-as-you-go generally means projects don't get done as quickly. You have to collect the money up front and wait till you have all the money in the bank, and then you can let the contract and start construction. So generally, in most economic conditions like we're in today, that means the cost of the projects would also potentially rise over time while you're waiting to collect that money. So in some circumstances, that increased cost can be, you know, offset that net interest cost that you pay on a financing. And we'll talk about that a little more as we get through the presentation as well. But so if you flip to page 8, what we've done here is we understand that there's always going to be a desire to minimize any sort of net interest cost associated with the financing. So in order to do that, we looked at some shorter term financings. The sales tax program has 12 years remaining on it. So we looked at a financing that would actually only be for 5 years. And for purposes of this illustration, we used a $75 million financing. I think as we get through the capital plan, you'll find that we're looking more at a $68 million financing, but this will give you a general sense of what the numbers look like in terms of the financing program. Again, here on page 8, if you look at a $75 million financing over 5 years that would be repaid from sales tax proceeds, even though it was issued as a COPS, you would still have over 2 times coverage on your sales tax revenue. So there's still sufficient coverage from your sales tax collections to make the debt service payments, and you'd also be collecting significant revenues above and beyond debt service to continue your pay-as-you-go program, which we'll also talk about. Perhaps most importantly, if you get down to the bottom of that page, on a $75 million 5-year financing, based on today's market conditions, which are very favorable, the district would repay about $4.4 million worth of net interest costs. So on a $75 million financing, you'd have about $79.45 million worth of total debt service payments. So $4.4 million above and beyond what you borrow would be repaid. And that's based on a 2.01% interest rate. I think most of us probably follow the markets. Really, since the beginning of the year, the Federal Reserve has sort of switched their stance on interest rates. There was an expectation they would be raising rates this year, which they did early on, but due to some economic factors and other things that are going on, they've actually quit raising rates, and the expectation now is they're actually going to cut rates or lower rates 1 or 2 times the rest of this year. So if you're ever going to borrow, now is a very favorable time to be doing that. If you flip to page 9 there, this is just a graphical depiction of what your debt service and excess sales tax revenues will look like after this proposed 5-year financing. The bright orange bars across the bottom are the debt service on your 2016 bonds. The brownish bars would be the 5-year debt service on this proposed financing, and then the larger orange bars that go out for the full term of the sales tax represent what you would collect above and beyond your debt service for your pay-as-you-go capital program. And over to the right, those excess sales tax revenues over the entire life of the program equate to about $520 million. And that's using some fairly conservative assumptions on growth. I think 1% for a few more years and then flat thereafter. The next two slides I won't spend much time on, 10 and 11, but this is just shows the numbers associated with the financing. So a 5-year financing, again, would result in a little less than $16 million of an annual payment and about $79.5 million of total debt service. Again, a little over $4 million of net interest costs there. And on page 11, you can see the aggregate debt service with the 2016 bonds included, being about $19 million for the first 5 years, and then dropping down significantly thereafter when only the 2016 bonds would remain outstanding. So that 5-year term financing is what we looked at based on feedback from the board, that minimizing interest cost was a top priority if a financing was going to get done. In transitioning to page 12, just for a comparison purposes for you all, this is a financing structure for 12 years, which is the remaining term of the sales tax. And again, this is similar to what we did in 2016 when we went level debt service for the full term of the sales tax. And here, since we're paying the debt service back over a longer period of time, you're going to have a lower annual payment, but you're going to pay more interest over time. So your coverage ratio is over 4.0 times under this scenario, where it was 2 times coverage based on the shorter payback. You have a 4 times coverage ratio of your sales tax revenues compared to debt service under this scenario. So this is going to create additional excess sales tax revenues in those first 5 years. Again, net interest cost here, as I mentioned, a little over $11 million. So you can see there, there's about, $6 to $7 million of additional net interest cost by paying this financing back over the 12-year period. Just like if you would finance your house with a mortgage for 30 years, you're obviously going to pay much more interest than if you would finance it over 20 years or 15 years. So the same concept here. And again, a little bit higher interest rate, 2.24%, because we're going further out the yield curve, but still a very attractive interest rate. On page 13, a similar graphic, and the next few slides will be the exact same, but for this scenario. And in this scenario, you still have about $513 million worth of excess sales tax revenues. A little less here, because you're obviously paying a little more interest on this long-term financing. And then pages 14 and 15, again here just graphically, your annual debt service on the 12-year financing is a little over $7 million a year for the next 12 years. And in aggregate, you would now have a level debt service stream in aggregate, about $10.5 million. So under this scenario, you're still generating about $30 million worth of excess sales tax revenues on an annual basis for pay-as-you-go projects. And then the last slide that I'll hit on is just a little bit of a variation on the short-term financing that provides some benefit, but it also provides some potential risk as well. And that's the revenue anticipation note. And what this is these are annual rolling notes. So you would potentially issue a $75 million RAN, and then each year you could decide how much principal you wanted to pay down, and then roll the remaining balance for another year, and do that. You can do that for 4 years. So this gives you some flexibility on how much principal you want to pay each year. Whereas with a sales tax or a COPS bond, you set the amortization schedule up front for principal repayment. This gives you some flexibility. So if there was a year where you wanted to pay additional principal down, you could do that. Or if there's a year where you said, we need an additional cash flow this year, we could defer a little bit of principal longer. So that's the benefit. The downside is each year you're subject to the interest rate at that point in time. So while right now you could borrow maybe at 2% for a year, in year 2, 3, and 4, that might not be the case. So you'd be subject to interest rates. So I don't necessarily think this is something we recommend doing, but it is an option out there that gives you some flexibility. And with that, I'm going to just in time turn it over to Ken before I get into a coughing fit.
I want to distribute something. Jay is good. Jay knows the numbers. Jay knows the market. I want to give you some real examples of what all of this means or translates to. And in conversations with individuals over the last couple of days, it was clear to me that you understand that your job is the steward of the sales tax. And your job is to make sure we get as many schools and improvements built as possible. And so if we took an example here, and what I distributed was a chart that basically shows the increase in construction costs over the last several years. And you'll notice that just looking at the last 2 years, a comparison of 17 to 18, which is a 5% jump, and the 18-19, which was a 6% jump. Let's assume that the numbers are going to go up over the next couple of years, and you pick the number. If you think it's going to be about the same, let's pick the lower number, 5%. So if we have a $60 million school that we can build either by borrowing at 2%, that school is going to cost us $64 million. As Jay has pointed, the net interest cost is about $4 million. If we wait under pay-go and assume that the cost of that school is going to go up by 5% a year for the 3 years that we wait, we now have a school that's going to cost us $69 million. Now, you have done exactly the analysis that you would need to do to determine, okay, what is the most economic? How do I get the best bang for my money and the most schools built? This isn't debt versus no debt. This is, do I build a school for $64 million or do I build a school for $69 million? Either way, you're paying something. You're either paying interest to a bank or you're paying $9 million to your contractors. But the important thing here is, if you go with the financing over the short period of time, and what Jay described was the 5-year option, which, given the financial markets right now, the short-term borrowing at 2% allows you to basically save $5 million on the cost of that school. So basically what that means is go to your pay-go list, which is basically all of these projects pushed out a couple of years as we wait for sales tax, and bring $5 million worth of those projects current. So not only do you get a school, but you get $5 million more of improvements on your list built. So for the taxpayers and the people that paid this sales tax, you're not only getting one school, you're getting one school plus those additional improvements. The stewardship of the money is, how do I get more of these schools built? And it's not necessarily quicker, but this is a situation just because we have such a secure revenue source. Sales tax is going to be readily accepted by the bond market, by the banks. We can leverage that to our benefit and pay them 2% over the next 5 years. This isn't, again, we're not advocating leveraging the entire revenue stream. This is taking a targeted approach to deliver that school. And yeah, if slide 8 is where I picked up my numbers, and it's just a way to really take advantage of the opportunity that you have here. If interest rates were higher, I wouldn't be using this as an example. It's just given the situation that you find yourselves in right now, the short-term borrowing at the rates they're talking about allows you to deliver more improvements on your list than you would otherwise under a pay-go type situation. And I think this chart is rather telling, given the fact of where costs of construction have increased. Now, I just wanted to drive that point home and not lose that nuance that Jay was mentioning with the various financing options. Back to you, Deb.
Thank you. Deb Muller, Chief Financial Officer. Considering what was just presented, what I'd like to do is just take a look at our revenue assumptions for the 5-year plan. So focusing mostly on a few points here. The second bullet point is PICO. And what I want to point out is that for fiscal year 20, the legislature awarded all PICO funds to charter schools. There was nothing that is allocated to our schools in next year's budget. So normally, historically, we've been collecting about $1 million. So while it's not a huge sum of money in the overall picture, it is a loss of $1 million for us that excuse me, we have removed from the budget projection. Our capital outlay property tax, as you know, we levy 1.5 mils against our taxable property, and the pre-preliminary tax roll showed a 7.85% increase in our taxable property from fiscal year 19. We recently received the certified tax roll from the property appraiser, and we actually have an 8.86% increase. So a little over 1% additional growth that we had not anticipated that will increase our ad valorem tax collections. And as Jay and Ken mentioned, our half-cent sales tax collection, we have projected that very conservative growth will happen in those collections for fiscal year 20. We projected a flat 1% increase over fiscal year 19 budget, and then an increase of 1% for the remaining 4 years of the 5-year plan, and then no growth after that. Our impact fees, as you know, with the amount of building that is going on, that does impact our schools. We have projected that for fiscal year 20, we would collect $6 million and then a conservative $5 million for the remaining 4 years. As you know, that there will be a consideration of a fee change in 2021, and then that would become effective December 31st, 2022. And interest income, although it's only $100,000 in projected revenue, we did look at whether we should expand that projection, as the last couple of years we've collected over $1 million. But as Jay pointed out, the rates now are projected to decline. So we have been very conservative with that projection. And again, in the overall scheme of the projects, it's not a huge factor, but I did want to point that out. In the bonding assumption budget, which we'll look at, the Deltona Middle Master Plan is estimated at $50 million. And current revenues cannot cover that. So with a bond, we would plan on $68 million borrowing.
Deb,
Yes.
I need to correct the record. I'm sorry. This is Sarah Lee Morrissey, the planning director for the school district. The current estimate that is reflected in your capital work program that is based on bonding is $58 million?
Yes.
I thought you said 50.
No.
Okay, sorry.
If I did, I apologize.
All right, just wanted to make that clear.
Yes.
I heard.
Just going back to that, the bonding assumption, it's currently estimated at $58 million, just to clarify. So taking a look at the 5-year work plan under bonding assumptions, I am going to pull up another slide so that we can really zoom in on that a little bit more. If you look at, with bonding, the state sources and then our ad valorem taxes, our local as well as our fiscal year sales tax, this is where you see the projection for each year. And that is the same in both scenarios. Where you see the first difference in scenarios would be down here under the other sources of funds, where you see other financing sources. We show the bond of $68 million if we were to borrow. And also the roll forward of the restricted fund balance. The other differences when you get down to the expenditure category is you see new construction for next fiscal year would be $87.3 million. And we'll go into some detail about what that does include. But when I show you the other slide, you will see that those numbers shift from next year out to 23. And you can see down at the bottom, just above the total expenditures, we have our projects in progress, which we roll forward. Those are about $101 million. In this scenario as well, you'll see down here under debt service, $26.8 million projected for next year. And then as Jay had stepped through, we would pay about $38.9 million over the remainder. And here you can see in the restricted fund balance rolling forward, we would have about $51 million at the end of fiscal year 20, and that would be level for the next 3 years. And then as we recoup some more of our sales tax money, then that would grow a little bit. Looking at this is the pay-as-you-go scenario. And as I mentioned, the state and local sources, our total revenue are the same under both scenarios. When you get down here, you can see there's no other financing source, as we would not borrow that $68 million as projected. Going down here under new construction, you see $26.3 million for next year, and that would be without the expenditure allocated for Deltona Middle School of $58 million. If you go back over here to fiscal year 22-23, this is where Deltona is included as $66 million total in new construction, including $60 million for Deltona Middle. And that relates back to that inflation factor that we talked about, and it's conservatively estimated at this point as a $2 million increase in construction costs if pushed out for 3 years. Going down to the debt service, you can see that it is level. It remains approximately the same as we would just be paying our $40 million bonds that were issued in fiscal year 16. Looking at the restricted fund balance, this is where you can see that because we are not borrowing and we are building that capacity to allocate the $58 million in fiscal year 22-23, we are building our fund balance, and then we would have that money available to allocate in fiscal year 22-23. Looking at our specific projects, again, and Sarah Lee, jump in if you want to say anything about these specific projects as we go through. But you can see under new construction with bonding, the $58 million allocated for Deltona Middle. And then George Mark's master plan, which we just recently received bids on that. And then New Smyrna Beach Middle Cafeteria and Media Center renovations. And that is the same under both scenarios. Where you'll see a difference, it starts right here under this project, these projects here, which is New Smyrna Beach, campus-wide renovations, and that would be pushed out for 1 year under each phase if we were not to bond. Going over here, you would see the Osceola master plan here. That would be allocated at $7 million the following fiscal year in 2021, and I'll point out the difference when we go to the other scenario, the pay-as-you-go. The other item that I'd like to point out here is this last one under new construction, Tomoka Elementary. And going over here, we've included $2 million for the design phase in 23-24, and that would be eliminated and pushed out to the following year under the pay-as-you-go. And as you look at these color-coded projects, I just want to note that the yellow highlighted projects are sales tax projects, and the green are from our LCIF, or our Local Capital Improvement Fund, which is our 1.5 mils ad valorem tax levy. And then when you see multiple other colors, there are different sources or mixed sources of revenue for those projects. Just going down, the other thing that I did want to point out is on the second page, we have a number of commitments for our sales tax revenue that when we went out to the voters, we did say that we were going to devote a certain amount of money annually to specific items as well. We have the media center retrofits scheduled throughout the project, as well as $2 million annually for safety and security projects, and then $3 million for high school athletics. And under the bonding scenario, we would be able to increase that from the pay-as-you-go amount of $1.6 million, and I will point that out as well. And down here, you see our technology projects of $9 million. And that is for our refreshes and our one-to-one equipment that we are trying to get to for students. And the only other item to point out here is the transfer to debt service, where again you see that amount increasing over 4 years if we were to bond. This next slide is the pay-as-you-go. And again, you don't see Deltona Middle here. You do see it out here. You do see it out here under 22-23, where it's estimated at this point at $60 million. You can also see the New Smyrna Beach campus-wide renovations pushed out for 1 year for each project. And then coming down here to the Osceola Elementary, we have new doors and windows. Under the bonding, there was a $7 million master plan budget here. Under the pay-as-you-go, it's $3.5 million for doors and windows in 2021, and $1.5 million for an administration building renovation. I don't know where my page 2 is. Okay, and just going down to page 2, you can see the difference here in the various schools for high school athletics. 1.6 million would be allocated next year for high school athletics versus 3 million under the bonding scenario, and 1.5 million for the remaining 4 years. And then at the bottom, you have your level debt service that we transferred to the debt service fund. Going back to the PowerPoint, I'm going to now turn it over to Sarah Lee so that she can talk to you about the specific projects.
Good morning,
Good morning.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Mr. Sims. My name's Sarah Lee Morrissey. I'm the Facilities Planning Director. Before I get into details about the work program, I'd like to recognize some colleagues that are here with me and have and are instrumental in ensuring that the work regarding our facilities gets done in a timely and cost-effective way. I'd like to recognize our Coordinator of Construction, Tom Brown,
Morning, Mr. Brown.
our interim Maintenance and Operations Director, Mr. Ron Young,
Mr. Young,
Coordinator of Accountability, Nadine Stevens,
Mr. Stevens.
and then
Miss,
Eric
excuse me.
Kozilski
I see
is
Mr.
our planning
Excuse me, Miss
specialist for data analysis, enrollment, and growth management.
Good morning.
And I may, depending on what kind of discussion we get into this morning, I may ask them to join us in our conversation. So I want to talk a little bit in detail about the work program and the potential differences between bonding versus pay-as-you-go. The next couple of slides are piggybacking on our Capital 101 presentation that we did back in, I think we did that March 12th. So I want to first talk about aging facilities and systems because, and I've said this before, these are not the glamorous projects. These are not usually the projects that we'll do a ribbon cutting for, but these are the projects that when there is a failure, there is a literal human outcry. It's immediate. If the failure was not anticipated and planned for, it has the potential of changing our work program, changing our priorities, and as you've seen on occasion, an emergency project comes before you. I worked on a worksheet last night that I thought might be helpful, and I'm going to ask if you could pass those around. I find myself, having been an employee in the facilities department since 1994, and having participated in both of our half-cent referendums and providing leadership on the most recent half-cent referendum, I find that even I, who know more details than perhaps the average person, still thinking about many of our schools as new. But the reality is that we really don't have very many new schools. Obviously, we have Pearson, brand spanking new. But if I look at what is considered new in the last 10 years, and I don't think about Pearson, we have 3. Ormond Beach Middle School, Citrus Grove, and University High School. You know, we might consider a portion of Holly Hill, you know, because when we converted Holly Hill to a K-8, the grades 6 through 8 are in new buildings, buildings that are younger than 10 years, but the remainder of that campus comes from the 1980s. So the worksheet that I prepared for you, I just thought it might give you a better indication of our schools. They are not, this worksheet isn't all of our facilities, it's our schools. And it shows you by year the earliest constructed building to the most recent constructed building. So if you think about what I just said, anything that we've done since 2010, if I look at, well, what have we done between 2000 and 2010? Because certainly that's the bulk of that last half cent. We've got about 13 campuses that we consider less than 20 years old, and not including more recent 10 years old. So between those two categories, that's about 22% of our inventory of schools are somewhere between less than 20 years old. But that's only 22% of our inventory, so if you start thinking about, well, what does that start to mean? It means we better be looking at systems. We better be looking at those older buildings. And honestly, we've got probably 40% of our inventory that is older than 40 years old. So, I'm sorry? I said we've got 40%, more than 40%, or right around 41% of our inventory that is older than 40 years. And on any given campus, you could be looking at a relatively recent building, and I think our Chisholm is a great example of that, because in the mid-2000s, the state gave us monies, Classroom for Kids, to address the constitutional mandate for class size reduction. And so we went to a number of our schools and built 9 classroom additions to account for the loss in capacity created by that class size amendment. So when you're looking at the worksheet and you see a range, that's, we have so many campus-style schools that honestly, and George Marks is a great example. On the George Marks campus, you'll, well, if you go there today, but if you go there tomorrow, the kindergarten building's probably already gone. But you'll see buildings that reflect construction in a number of different decades, and it just reflects the way we've done school construction in Florida. Volusia is not unique to that. So much of our work program and our half cent is devoted to systems issues and changing these older campuses into 21st century schools. The thing that concerns me about the difference in our pay-as-you-go plan and our bonding program is if you look at the portion of the work program that is your existing projects at existing schools and facilities. And roughly the difference was there's about $30.8 million in projects under pay-as-you-go and closer to about 33 for fiscal year 20. The piece that concerns me is there's no flexibility for us with pay-as-you-go. And if you look at that work program, you see a number of projects that are pushed out into years beyond fiscal year 20. And you see a placeholder of 11 million under facilities review. In your fiscal year 20 program, we have nearly $12 million devoted just to air conditioning. We've got about $5 million, almost $6 million devoted to roofing. And we've got almost $1 million to electrical and almost $1 million to fire alarm and intercom. That's well above that $11 million placeholder that's in those future years. And my only point here is we are trying to accrue enough dollars to be able to do Deltona Middle. What jeopardizes that fiscal year 23 placeholder for Deltona Middle is that at any given time in any given year, we could have an unforeseen condition. And that unforeseen condition may have nothing to do with a hurricane. It may have something to do with the age of our buildings and the fact that our maintenance department was not able to continue to limp along a particular system. So I want to make sure that I make that clear to the board because, as you know, and certainly board members who've been with us for a number of years, when you adopt your 5-year work program, what you're adopting shows an intention, but you are actually funding the next year, fiscal year 20 in this case. So all those outlying years are subject to change in a next budget year. If you could go to the next slide, please, Deb, on I think it's page 24. So I wanted to talk about projects that are curriculum and or athletic related. We have been plugging away at our media centers. And this summer, we will be, Palm Terrace Elementary is already completely torn up, their media center, and DeLand High School's is on the way to being torn up. Next year, our intention is to start looking at our middle school media centers. Something that is new in the work program and does not change, regardless of whether you go with pay-as-you-go or bonding, is that we are showing a line item for elementary school pavilions and also playgrounds. We went through all of our elementary school pavilions and inventoried them. As some of you may be aware that in the last half cent, we funded elementary school pavilions for the purpose of providing some covered area for physical education. We come up with about a dozen schools that do not have equity with regard to what they may have on site and comparing that to what was done with previous half-cent monies. And so it is our recommendation that we start moving forward and addressing that inequity, and that would not vary based on whether you pay as you go or you bond. We show $300,000 for each year. That allows us to do a minimum of 2. Depending on what is on a specific campus, and or where a campus is, because some of our schools utilize their communities, whether it's a parent and booster group or whether certainly some of our East Side schools have access to the Racing and Recreation Commission, who gives grants. For next year, we have recommended Enterprise Elementary and Spruce Creek Elementary. And if Longstreet Elementary needs assistance, we would assist them. They received a grant from the Racing and Rec Commission. Playgrounds. I want to talk a little bit about playgrounds, and this does not change based on whether you go pay as you go or bond. Again, in the half-cent sales tax last time, we included monies for all of our elementary schools for playgrounds. As you know, we've got 2 playgrounds, formal playgrounds on our campuses, one for our kindergartens and then another one for older children. One of the things that's also changed since last time was now we have mandated recess. So we're certainly more cognizant of when someone requests portables, what do we need to do, and whether or not portables are going to take up needed playfield area. When a playground is safety sited, and I know you know we have annual safety inspections, and that was an audit criticism that we've not been addressing all of those safety citations in a timely manner. Playgrounds may not be getting replaced with a like product, all right? And so one of our recommendations is that we start allocating specific monies annually for playgrounds so that we can address changes over time. And the recommended budget is also $300,000, and that would allow us, what we're budgeting is 5 schools at $60,000 a playground. The 5 that we would move forward for next year are Indian River, Longstreet, Port Orange, Deltona Lakes, and Pine Trail, and those are all based on safety citations and recommendations from our safety officer. Athletics. In the half cent, I've talked about this to those board members that have been on the board for a little while. In our current half cent program, we've actually identified high school athletics, and it's the first time in the history of the school board of which I'm aware that there's been a formal allocation to high school athletic facilities. For decades, the focus, rightly so, has always been academics, and schools have pretty much been on their own. And all of the high schools constructed by the district, their outside, I'll use the word athletic, their outside athletic facilities have been built for the purposes of physical education and practice. They've not necessarily been built for the purposes of competition. Where you see competition level at our high schools, and if you would, let's, 2 slides from now. I think that would show best. This is an inventory of all of our high school facilities for athletics. If you think about the age of our communities and look at the philosophy that existed for decades, our older communities, DeLand, New Smyrna Beach, Daytona Beach, these were communities that had municipal stadiums and were where Friday night lights occurred. And so the schools that are in those communities never had competition level facilities for football and now soccer, and never played at home. They were always at municipal stadiums, and in more recent years, we've acknowledged that relationship, and we're helping both our schools with the fees associated with that and our communities in recognizing the expense associated with that, and that's through our interlocal agreements. If you go to our Deltona community, though, certainly a young community if you compare it to the other 3 I named, and there was no municipal stadium when those 2 schools were constructed. Deltona High, 1986, Pine Ridge High, 1994 construction. But the board did not fund the stadiums on those schools' campuses. Those schools' stadiums were funded by the local community, the parent groups, the booster groups. Obviously, once they're on our campus, we share in the responsibility for maintaining them or not, and then no longer being usable, but that initial capital outlay was raised locally. And I point all that out because we're constantly feeling the pressure associated with high school athletics. Our schools bear the burden of raising their own funds, whether it be for maintaining the fields, preparing them for practice and or play, and transporting to wherever practice and or play occurs. And Deb, if you would please go back 1 slide. This shows the board what we have expended and or budgeted in this current year and potentially for next year. Goes back to fiscal year 16. So it has taken a bit of time, but once we complete this year's projects, I feel like we will begin to be able to show across all schools that we're starting to make some investment in our high school athletics. However, we still have a ways to go in terms of addressing the issues that keep getting raised either by our school or by our communities. The line item that is in the half-cent project list, the resolution that the board approved, says is specifically for high schools. It says track resurfacing / renovation, and we've got 3 underway now, one of which has been completed. That's at Pine Ridge. And then it says athletic fields. Doesn't go into any more detail on athletic fields. You can see from the worksheet that we've spent monies on fields. Our maintenance department is not funded to take care of our fields, again, for competition purposes. And you can see both at University and now at Mainland, where we are investing some funds to address safety issues that have been reported on football practice fields for those schools. We've begun to address lighting, and I want to speak to that for just a minute because lighting is very expensive. Last year, we tackled the first lighting project, and that was at University High, and we are currently underway at Atlantic High. I know you'll see a different dollar figure spent at University versus what is budgeted for Atlantic. There are reasons for that. The Atlantic project includes a major component that is addressing drainage issues. About $340,000 is going directly towards regrading and drainage to make the field that is now going to be lit playable for competition. And then there are some other components associated with the actual lighting. There's an additional pole, additional control features. Some of the materials are stainless steel, recognizing the location closer to the coast. And we see that with all kinds of systems, shorter life cycle because of location and being near the coast. And then doing some directional bore for conduit versus trench. So those are the basis for why you see a considerable price difference between those lighting projects. One of the questions that's been raised is with a change in schedule, bell times, for next year, our high school students will be getting out a year later. No, that's contrary to our goal for graduation. They'll be getting out an hour later, 3:30. So that's going to shorten the period of time that they're outside during winter. And so we have been starting to hear a little bit about that. We are not funded to do anything for that. On the next slide, on that inventory, you'll see that no high school, with the exception of Spruce Creek High, has lighting on baseball and softball. And I would caution you that if we move in that direction, we've got to do both baseball and softball. That's a Title IX issue. We can't do one and not the other. So if we were to move in that direction, we would fund baseball and softball in the same year. And if you look at our campuses, you're going to see cost differences as we move forward because some baseball and softball fields are right next to each other, and so there could be some savings in lighting, you know, because they could share perhaps an arm or so. And then on other campuses, you'll see they're very far apart. So I want to caution us, and that is, and this absolutely is board policy direction to us. If we were to go into that direction, I would not be recommending it on a pay-as-you-go program because it absolutely will take away from all those other issues I've mentioned, and all those other issues address our academics. So the reason why that work program shows a potential change in the bonding is only to reflect that the only way I, as your staff, could recommend you consider that is if we had some room to breathe with our revenue stream, and that would only be through bonding. I'm not necessarily recommending you do that. It was for illustration purposes. So the next couple of slides, I wanted to take the board through our planning areas, because the other responsibility that we have when we're looking at our work program is to look at capacity. There's been a lot of conversation about growth issues in this county and how this county has or has not addressed growth. For new board members' benefit and for the audience, people should know that this county is one of the only counties in the state that recognizes schools as a component of infrastructure and actually mandates through the county charter that capacity be considered before making an increase in residential densities effective. And so we continue to work very closely with all of the municipalities in the county on development programs. And I want to just take you around the county and speak briefly, if I could, to what's going on. So we start at the top of the county, North Halifax area, and we'll go clockwise. This is primarily Ormond and our Holly Hill communities. Slow growth from a student enrollment standpoint that I would attribute largely to aging issues. There are new subdivisions in the area, and we can see where those subdivisions impact our schools. The Security First construction that is happening at the crossroads of US 1 and Interstate 95 at the North County line, that's economic development that's happening, major investment. When that is done, there will be new jobs coming to the area, and perhaps we will start to see an influx of more families with children. In the half-cent program, we've got Osceola Elementary and Tomoka Elementary recognized. And I'm going to speak a little bit about Osceola in a few minutes. And I know Deb mentioned both as she went forward. We did receive a charter school application that would impact the schools in this area. The charter school that would be on Nova Road, and that is being appealed to the state. Certainly, if that school opens, I would anticipate seeing enrollments at our area schools affected by that. Next slide, please. Moving into the Central Halifax area, this is where there's an enormous amount of activity, both in non-residential and residential. And certainly we are seeing moderate increases in our enrollments. And I would submit to you, if you may remember when I came forward with the school impact fee study update, we recognized that we're seeing more students come out of multifamily apartments. We've increased the student generation rate associated with that type of residential unit. And if you look at the multifamily units that Eric provided for us, we've got over 2,000 that are in some form of development, either approval and or actual construction. The only thing I can say is fortunately they're not all happening in one of our attendance areas. They are happening throughout West Daytona Beach, and they will impact our Westside Elementary, Palm Terrace Elementary, Champion Elementary, and you see a huge single-family development associated with Champion, and that is the Mosaic development that is out near LPGA. I think we're in good shape in terms of preparing for what's happening out west. We've got our new classroom building at Westside Elementary opening in August. We've got 11 new classrooms there. We will be moving 2 multi-VE units from Champion to West Side, again, for this school year. We've got a very high ESE population at Champion, a number of different ESE programs. We will at least pull 2 units right now to begin to look at what is happening in Champion. And we're making significant investments in Palm Terrace to keep that school, which is a 1989 school, moving forward as we go forward. We saw a big increase in our Turie T. Small enrollment this year, and we believe there's 2 reasons for that. One is choice. We approved a very high number of variance requests, and that's from the neighborhood, people wanting to go to a school that's closer to where they live. We've also, again, seen an increase in enrollments that are coming out of apartments. And there are a number of apartment buildings that are in the area that impact Turie T. Small, as well as Horizon, which is my segue to my next slide, the South Halifax area. This is South Daytona and Port Orange, and we're also seeing some moderate increases here. However, not that Port Orange is getting close to build out. There's a couple of subdivisions well underway. We did a redistricting back in, I believe we did it in 09, 010, where we created what I call islands of growth, where we took areas that were west of 95 and created islands that go to different schools in Port Orange so that we could balance enrollments and help share the impact of growth through a number of schools, and that would minimize our need to move faster than necessary on new construction. What we have is Woodhaven that has started construction. That's in the Cypress Creek zone, and there are a number of, that's a single family development, but that would be the last big development in Port Orange, and we will continue to watch what happens in that Cypress Creek zone. I will tell you, we are slightly surprised that we didn't see enrollment increases faster, and when Eric took a closer look at that, what we noticed, and this makes sense after realizing it, the Water's Edge subdivision, which is now getting close to 20 years old, not 20 years old, but it's getting close because it started right after we announced Creekside Middle School, and Creekside's almost 20 years old. That subdivision is aging, and so the students, the families that went there, their children are beginning to move out of the K-12 system. So we're not ready for new construction or a new school in South Halifax, but it is an area we'll continue to monitor. Southeast, when you look at our residential units, and certainly I know Eric attends planning board meetings regularly, you can see this by far so far is where the largest amount of residential is happening, both single family and multifamily. As a result of the school impact fee study, we have moved townhomes, which we used to consider as single family, into the multifamily category. But for the number of residential units that we're seeing, that is not correlating with a high increase in student enrollments. And we attribute that to the aging that we see in the Southeast, and also housing values, because we definitely can see a difference in certain subdivisions attracting more families than others, and there is a considerable difference in the value of the residential in those areas. New Smyrna Beach Middle School is on our half-cent list. It's the next school that we need to tackle in Southeast. It's a 1981 school. We need to go after it in the same manner that we just finished Galaxy. and are finishing this year DeLand Middle. We also need to be cognizant that with the new charter school that's going to be opening, presumably in 2020, that it is going to impact our middle school and our high school in Southeast. So I think, as we move forward with capital spending in Southeast, we want to use those dollars wisely and in a way to help compete. Moving over to Southwest, which is our Deltona community. Our Deltona community, again, this is an area where the city proper is getting close to build out. We see a couple of new subdivisions, but this was a community where we saw unprecedented growth in the 80s and the 90s, and we saw significant investment by the school board during those times to build new schools for the community. And I think you'll see that if you look at the worksheet that I gave to you. So what's important to us in Deltona is to invest in those schools and keep them running, primarily through systems issues. We do see a higher persons per household in Deltona than we see in our other communities, and I would say that and certainly during the recession when we did some drill down, we saw families doubling up, and we also see more children per household than we do in other areas. Ivy Hahn and Reading Edge, our charter schools in that area, do impact our Deltona schools, as well as some of our DeLand schools. And then going to the west area, which is Orange City, DeBerry, and DeLand, considerable residential activity, not at the same level as we saw on the east, but considerable activity. For new board members, I want to make sure you are aware that we deliberately oversized George Marks Elementary, and we are doing a redistricting to address Citrus Grove. We initiated that a while ago. We will come forward at the beginning of next school year to you with that redistricting. We met with the communities affected and had meetings at both schools, Citrus Grove and George Marks. I think it's prudent to do it again, and then we'll be coming forward to you recommending you go through policy to make that effective when the new school opens. And certainly George Marks is relying on you to adopt your budget. You see no difference. If you could go to that next slide. You see no difference in your pay-as-you-go or your bonding program on George Marks Elementary. We've already expended significant dollars setting up the portable village. We are underway with abatement and demolition this summer. We received, I am very, very pleased with the GMP, guaranteed maximum price, that we received. It will be on your June 25th agenda. The team that is involved with this project, both in-house, your facility staff, the architect and the contractor, have worked very well together. I'm so pleased with it. The price is 10% less than what we estimated last year, and I would like to say it's because of the efforts of all the individuals involved, but I would also like to believe that maybe there's a little stabilization in the market. Only time will tell, because as Mr. Arton and Mr. Glover spoke to you, and we have our own evidence now through our own projects, construction costs absolutely are volatile. The state does not address construction costs in a reasonable way. They use the Consumer Price Index. This year in the legislation, they actually finally acknowledged that it was an inappropriate index, and they have in their legislation directed EDR, Economic and Demographic Research, and DOE to come up with a construction cost index and use it for measuring our construction costs per student station. And any facilities department in Florida is ready, able, and willing to give data and help. The graphic that Mr. Arton gave you is a graphic that many in the construction industry rely on and use. It's the Turner Construction Index. They are a company involved heavily in construction, national company, and they've been monitoring construction costs for 80 years. And they have been putting out an index since that time, and their index measures from year to year. And I would say to you, when I look at what we now have done, I look at, and this is actually to address a comment that you made, Ms. Haynes, in our workshop in March about how much more the sales tax is bringing in, which it is. It's 30% more than what was estimated in 2013. But how does that relate to our construction costs? So if I look at what was estimated for one of our elementary school replacements back in 2013, we were estimating $16.5 million for a replacement school. If I look at applying the CPI to that, which at that time, we guesstimated just slightly over 1%. Our school at Pearson should have cost us $17.2 million. If I look at the actual CPI that happened over that 4-year period, our school should have cost us just a little bit more than $17.6 million. Our school cost us 18.5. That was the GMP. We actually came in a little under after reconciliation of everything, but the GMP was 18.5 million, and that did not address the off-site infrastructure that we had to do, which was another 1.5 million. So if I look at that, that was 12%. That 18.5 million was 12% over the estimate. If I look at the following year, which was Chisholm, that was 12% over the Pearson cost, and that doesn't reflect the portable village. So even though I'm very, very pleased with the number that we will be recommending to you on the 25th for George Marks, that number does not reflect the portable village and site improvement costs. So I think Mr. Arton's comments need to be considered because we're experiencing it. If there is stabilization, we would benefit by moving forward with Deltona Middle. Now I want to talk a little bit about Deltona Middle. So in your work program that's shown to you today, we are showing you $58 million. That is a 10% increase over the cost estimate that our contractor gave us back in January when we presented the schematic design to you. That was $53 million. So this is 10% over that. What I want to mention to you is we are encountering soil conditions. I think I mentioned this in my update to you last month. We are encountering soil conditions at Deltona Middle that are causing us to do a lot more investigation. And in fact, this month, we're doing about $60,000 worth of soil borings and going down 100 feet in order to ascertain geographically where and if any concerns exist, If we find those concerns do exist and we do not shift the buildings from where we presented them in January, I have to say that I am not necessarily comfortable with $58 million, because we will be investing significant dollars in pilings, which is what we did at University High. At the same time that we are doing this soil boring investigation, we are also revisiting the site plan. You know, one of the things I know I mentioned to you in January is how DOE holds our feet to the fire on demolition. You know, I question whether we have to really honor that anymore, given the change in legislation that has occurred, which is now they're actually acknowledging that the 1.5 mil, your LCIF, is local money instead of taking the position that it's state money. And they are saying that that money and any projects associated with your impact fee, your half-cent, and now your LCIF, does not have to be in an educational plan survey. I would argue to you that if you, the board, made a decision that demolition of a building was warranted, I would argue that we don't necessarily need DOE's approval. And so one of the things that we are looking at because of this issue associated with soil conditions is where that ag barn is. Because the ag barn, honestly, I know it's a relatively recent building, but you know, if you were to rebuild an ag barn, you know, maybe you're looking at $150,000. It's not a classroom. It doesn't have all the same features. But if we're able to shift our buildings out of the area, I would argue to you that that is money well spent, time well spent, and that we're not spending monies on pilings. And so my hope is to know by the end of this month. The only reason we don't have an answer for you on borings is because that investigation is time consuming and extremely noisy, and we were not able to do it while school was in session. So we're gonna knock it out this month and hope to answer those questions for all of us soon, but I go on record now because I have to tell you that that $58 million is my best guesstimate based on all the information I've shared. If we decide that pay-as-you-go is the way to go, I am going to be recommending to you that we terminate our contracts with the architect and the contractor. There is no penalty to do that. We owe them for all the product that they will have given us by that time, which I'm going to estimate will be between the two parties somewhere around $1 million. But because of all the other things we've already mentioned, continuing to spend money, building codes are going to change. Who knows what else changes, programs, whatnot. I think we need to hold before we continue to spend monies on design and construction management. We've already talked a little bit about New Smyrna Beach Middle, Osceola Elementary. I don't have much more to say about New Smyrna Beach Middle School other than whenever we initiate that project. But definitely if we go with the bonding program, if there is a way to not phase that over as many years, I would like to do that. I would also like to not have to set up a portable village like we've done at Galaxy Middle and DeLand Middle. And so that may be one reason to continue to phase. But we would take a closer look at that once we get that project underway. Osceola Elementary, I want to tell you that our Project Oversight Committee, which for listeners is the citizens committee that our board committed to in its resolution for its half-cent sales tax, and who are appointed by our board, has sat with us on a very regular basis. They're an excellent committee. They've looked at this issue, pay-as-you-go versus bonded, and they believe that bonding is what the board should consider. In particular, they were not happy with Osceola Elementary, with the recommendation that we made for the pay-as-you-go program. Their comments, and as staff, your facility staff agrees with their comments. All we are doing are addressing building issues. We are not improving the functionality of that campus, the educational adequacy associated with how that campus functions, and we're not bringing it forward to 21st century standards. We are addressing real problems that we can no longer ignore. I want to say that from a master plan standpoint, I show $7 million in that second year. I would not be surprised, though, if after spending time on thorough investigation and with the assistance of architect, mechanical engineer, electrical engineer, structural engineer, and looking at educational adequacy and functionality, that we wouldn't come forward with something that could possibly require additional monies. And the only way we will be able to address that is through a bonding program. And then my last slide, and you will no longer have to listen to me. I know you're ready. Spruce Creek High. So this is our oldest high school. It celebrated its 40th anniversary recently, and it is a challenge. What? 4 years ago. Right. So this is going to be a challenging project whenever it happens. If we don't start figuring out a way to address it, we will, I can assure you that we will continue to invest in it through systems. We have HVAC issues there now. We've got a number of other issues. One of the recommendations we are making to you, and it doesn't change in either program, is to utilize the impact fees and do a classroom addition. Start recognizing the fact of how many portables are there. And by doing a classroom addition first, I'm not going to pretend that this makes it easy, but it would begin to give us a way to start looking at how to move forward with the school building itself. Because I think we would be doing some major remodeling. There's a number of spaces that are not big enough for the student population, cafeteria being a great example. The restrooms absolutely need addressed. So we need more area to be able to address those. And so with the classroom addition, we think that would give us some flexibility. And in the outer years, because I could see that being I don't know how many year, multi-year project, but I think we would recommend a multi-year project as opposed to a huge amount of money up front. And then last, Tomoka Elementary, that is going to be a complicated project. We have 3 buildings that we think we would keep. They're towards the back of the campus. Those buildings actually need some investment in their air conditioning now, and we do recognize that if you look at the existing schools, we're showing that. But in the bonding program, we think we could move it forward and start design in the 5th year. And then I've already mentioned the issue with athletics. And that would conclude my detail
Thank you,
associated with.
Ms. Morrissey. We're going to take a break, and we'll be back in about 15 minutes.
Will we be able to ask questions?
Oh, of course. Yes, indeed. Thank you, Lord. Thank you. You doing okay?
Absolutely believe that.
Yes, there we go.
You are. Okay, we are.
Okay.
We are back.
Yes, we are ready for any questions and board discussion.
Okay, so Ms. Cuthbert, you indicated you had a few questions there, so let's go ahead.
May I go up to Osceola Elementary? If I could?
Sure.
Okay. I noticed it is a small school, correct? Much like Coronado Elementary, small in population?
Not as small as Coronado. It's about 450.
It's almost twice the size as Coronado. But I also wanted to let everybody know it's on the beach side. Much like Coronado in my district, receives an awful lot of wind and salt air damage. But it's also one of the, I guess it's, there are only 2 elementary schools on the beach side besides Long Street.
We've got Coronado,
Coronado.
Long Street. Riverview Learning Center,
Oh, okay.
Ortona Elementary,
Ortona.
Osceola Elementary, Seabreeze High School.
Okay, I'm talking about elementaries.
So-
And for all of those living on that beach side, we only have 4 elementary schools.
That's correct.
So they are necessary and address our population on the beach side. Correct.
They address our population on the beach side.
Okay. So if we closed any one of those schools, especially like Coronado, it would not give, our families would not be served. They'd have to cross the bridge and go to a mainland high school, mainland school, many more miles out of their way, correct?
At Coronado, yes.
Okay. What would be the nearest elementary at Osceola?
Ortona, it's 2 miles south.
2 miles south. Okay, and how many are at Ortona?
200.
200. And also I wanted to let everybody know, and I think you can address this more clearly than I can, we are one of the few remaining school districts that still address low. We want to make sure our elementaries are not mega schools. Most of the elementaries we're rebuilding now are 750, correct, for students? But we still maintain elementaries that are on 400 or 500 students. That's correct. Do you know any other county in the state that prefers that?
I think 67 counties. I'm not going to say I know what every single one of them is doing.
Yeah.
Oh, come on, Sarah Lake.
What I know is in counties that experience rapid and high levels of growth, they will address that growth by building bigger schools, okay? And so I know that, and I'm going a little bit back in time, because regardless of where you are in Florida right now, we're in this bubble where the focus is on people 55 and older, okay? That's because of where we are as a country and where the bubble is on population. But in certainly a previous time when we were, as a state and as school districts, focused on rapid, high growth, a number of districts were building elementary schools at 1,000. A number of them were in Florida. I can't say whether or not they're still doing that. I know that Orange County does 850 now, their elementary schools, unless there's a unique circumstance. Which, George Marks, we're doing that one to 850. So.
My point in all of this is that I'm very cognizant that our elementary students usually is where we start finding issues, either with behavior or learning needs, their socialization.
And I'm sorry, because I did not mean to suggest that other districts are not maintaining small schools. I know that other districts are. We just went to visit one in Brevard, and they're at, I think, 350 right now, and they only want to grow to 450. It's a special magnet school. So I didn't mean to suggest there aren't others with smaller schools, but just for the sole purpose of addressing growth was my intent.
Well, I was just saying that I'm very much appreciative of the district's approach to smaller schools, if we possibly can, for our elementary schools, in order to address the issues of our students. So as they move to the middle school, they will have been, I don't want to, how do you say it? Their needs are met.
Well, and I
more
will
on an
say,
individual basis.
the legislation that Mr. Arton spoke about, which was basically removing legislation that had gone in a couple years ago, helps districts to be able to make that decision, because the construction cost per student station as it has existed in this state, and when the punitive measures were applied to it, encouraged school districts to build large elementary schools, because that's the only way you could address an unreasonable cost per student station, and the fact that your core facilities, admin, media center, cafeteria, don't have any student stations.
So, and that's why I think we continue to invest in our schools, especially Ortona, Osceola, Coronado, because they're so necessary to address the needs of those students and as we continue to grow.
No,
Yes, yes,
Because
Ms. Wright.
I just want to piggyback on that, because I do see that a little differently. Because we're talking about 3 schools that are extremely small, 2 within 2 miles of each other. How realistic is it for us to keep investing money? And they're both on the beach side. So they are being impacted by the salt water. We have to look at their air conditioners more frequent, and some of their, how wise is it for us to have 2 schools with 600 students total, and I don't think it's 600 with both of them, and within 2 miles? Now, am I saying close them? I say we might want to look at rebuilding one to address the needs of that area, because that area is not saturated with children. That is the reality. And it's not an area that will be saturated with children. So I agree with you, because I am really for community schools, but 2 miles of each other, and then we have Ormond Beach Elementary with less than 300,
Yes.
Coronado with 200. I mean, eventually we will have to have those discussions. And they are, I mean, because you have Coronado and Reed Patillo. So when we're talking about what do we do as far as growth, and your area is the area that actually is going to experience probably the most growth over the next few years, what do we do? And that is not an easy answer, but just looking at the budget for Osceola, and then next, I'm sure we're gonna have to look at Ortona. Is that really the best use of our taxpayers' dollars, of just the dollars, period?
I wasn't going to go into combining or closing.
I
I'm just
understand.
glad that we address the needs of our 400 or even 500 member
got you,
schools,
but-
and not going to 700, 800. And I know Spruce Creek Elementary right now is what, 880, so they're getting larger.
But I think to help with this capital budget discussion, we do have to talk about that. Because if you look at the amount of money that we're talking about expending at Osceola, I think we're gonna have to address it. I don't think that's something we can continue to kick down the road, unfortunately.
I agree with you. I
Okay.
wasn't addressing
I
that.
got
I'm
you.
just glad we do that. But thank you very much.
Okay, back to Ms. Cuthbert now. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. And then I noticed Terry T. Small is at 117% capacity. And I saw nothing in the capital budget that would address that. How are they doing with students?
Good point. So like I said earlier, some of that is associated with choice, students wanting to attend a school closer to their home. But you make a valid, you point out a valid issue. And it also, I think, relates to size of school and the nature of our schools in terms of recognizing the differences of demographics in specific schools. Certainly, we could look at classroom addition. I know in the last half cent, we did a new cafeteria at TT. I believe it was a new cafeteria. New cafeteria and remodeled the old to art and music. But there are some portables on that campus.
And just to interject, and that's why I made the comment, Linda, because many of the kids who live around Turie are bused to Ortona and bused to Osceola, and that is not where they want to go to school.
Thank you. And that's why I agree with you, the discussion needs to be had, but I did not know about the busing. So as we get more and more information, I was just saying that I would prefer smaller elementary schools.
I do.
Yeah.
Like I said, I love neighborhood elementary, but because of how we've tried to, and it's federal law, you know, how we've tried to diversify our schools, most of the students who live around that school do not attend that school. They're bused out.
Yeah.
From
And it's the
Horizon
same,
to Osceola to Ortona.
it's the same thing at Reeve Dotilla as well. And I have one last question for you. Let's see. Talked about that we look, when we build new schools and infrastructure, the population, the capacity through the Volusia County Charter capacity is looked after. Does that pertain to charter schools as well? I mean, do they have to go through that Volusia County Charter?
No, that, it is a developer who is proposing to increase the residential density on property they own or have under contract. That is who goes through the review.
Okay, so it's not schools. Okay, so charters can build anywhere, across the street from any school, whether or not it's not needed or not.
There's some language in statute that gives charters rights that traditional don't particularly have. Some of those rights, although the legislature seems to not care so much about local control, they've done a number of things, not just to school districts. So in part, Mrs. Cuthbert, it depends on whether it's raw land, right? If a charter school wants to build a brand new school on raw land, they're going to be subject to whatever the local zoning and land use is of that jurisdiction. If they are going into a facility and remodeling, there are exemptions given to it in statute that, regardless of what a jurisdiction's local zoning has to say, that they may not have to comply. And we would.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cuthbert. Who has, Mr. Colon? Yep.
So I think there's no secret of where I stand on a lot of this, but what was very eye-opening today was to see the number of projects that would be impacted if we bonded. And, piggybacking on the conversation about Osceola, going pay-as-you-go, we're going to spend $5+ million or $5 million in doing exterior walls, new windows, and the pay-as-you-go, and administration building renovations, whereas with bonding, and again, I'm not even going into the conversation that was just had, we're looking at, possibly next year coming up with a master plan. And so the master plan, you've got $5 million lined up as pay-as-you-go, which means we're going to patch this up, or we're going to spend $7 million in doing the inevitable, which is going to need to happen no matter what. And so I am glad to hear that we could responsibly borrow this money and as a district not put ourselves in any risk. There was talk about the increase in construction costs, and at the end of the day with the 5-year model, as you spoke, we are actually at risk of paying a lot more, at least $2-3 million more that we could have used to knock out God knows how many other projects. So I kind of tried to fold this together and figure out which projects would and would not. And I think I'll go back to something Sarah Lee said. If we do the pay-as-you-go, it would take one huge repair to slow everybody else's little projects down. So I'm glad to see we could responsibly borrow this money and still have quite a bit of a cushion to deal with. So that's all I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cologne. Ms. Wright, Ms. Hain?
Jane?
I don't know, who was first?
Go ahead. Let her go.
No, I want her first.
You don't want, you want, Ms. Wright, that means you.
Yeah, that means me. I don't have too much to say, because when we were here last time, I said to my colleagues, and neither one of you sat on the board, that just from speaking with contractors, and my husband's a general contractor, he said, you're gonna pay one way or the other. You're gonna pay at the beginning, or you're gonna pay at the end. But I think the graphic was very telling. If we look back at our, when we did this in June of 18, we looked at Deltona as costing us $50 million. That was the peak. We're already at 58, which could easily escalate to 68. And the longer we delay some of these major projects, depending on when the building bubble will burst, because it will, but we just don't know when. And so we're still gambling with money. And looking at paying $4 million, right now, if we still waited, we're already $8 million in the hole for Deltona. So
Yeah.
the $4 million that the money we thought we were saving, we were really behind the 8 ball because we really didn't save anything. That's it for me.
Thank you, Ms. Wright. And Ms. Haynes?
So I'm the odd man out here. I don't believe in borrowing money unless it's absolutely necessary. And I'm going to disagree for a moment that it's not the 4 million. It's actually 11 million. So you can sit there and say it's 4 million, but actually what we're going to pay back is 11 million.
Can I get you to clarify that?
So if you look on page, hang on.
Yeah, I'm assuming you're on page 10.
Yes, I think so.
So, yeah, and this is where we get into the weeds of bond finance math. You're paying $10.6 million of interest, but you're borrowing $75 million, and you're only paying back $69 million worth of principal. So you're paying $79 million of debt service on a $75 million borrowing. So you're paying net interest of $4 million over and above what you're borrowing. So what you're paying over and above your borrowing is $4.4 million. And that's because bonds price at a premium. So you have to issue fewer bonds than to generate the $75 million worth of proceeds. So,
And I'm aware of that.
so over and above what you are borrowing is $4.4 million being paid back.
So what I find interesting is that when we met in February and March about this, Deltona Middle was moving forward. And the big discussion at that time was, let's bond to start it either 4 months or 6 months earlier, depending on which discussion. Now we need to bond or it's 3 years out. So it went from, we were going to start it, but we could start it 4 to 6 months earlier. Now it's, well, if you don't bond, you just pushed it 3 years out. I'm struggling with who made the decisions that it went from being, okay, I'll just say, oh, we were gonna start it this July, but if we bonded, we could have started it in February. Now we're gonna start it 3 years from now.
So let me address that issue. So one of the reasons I went into such detail on slide 23 and gave you the worksheet showing your year of construction at your various schools is because in any given year, we may or may not know what issues are going to be confronted with. I can tell you, and again, trying to explain a placeholder of $11 million for facilities review which in the day when this board had more money, there was a larger placeholder for facilities review. Facilities review are all of these projects associated with slide 23. And you have just $12 million just in air conditioning. And that is only in fiscal year 20, and that is only in the projects that we are aware of, and that either maintenance or our project managers are saying we can delay on, because you need to look at those outer years that we're actually showing additional projects. The original submittal, in terms of the process we have internally, was asking us to fund all of that stuff this year. There's no way to do that, regardless of bonding. There is no way to do that. So the issue is trying to have a balanced budget and prioritizing those projects that need to be addressed in order to keep all schools functioning in a manner that they can be inhabitable. So that's the reason why it changed, is because of the projects that came forward and saving up the money in order to have enough money. There's an issue of maintaining an adequate fund balance that goes with it. And so that is included in your budget as well. So that's how it happened.
Well, and I think also how it happened is, and I'm not knocking athletics, but it appears that a lot of athletic projects seem to have moved their way up as Deltona Middle moved its way back, if we go as the pay-as-you-go. My first and foremost responsibility is to the academic education of the students of Volusia County. So nothing against athletics, but I'm not in support of athletic projects such as lighting. We built University High and didn't build the football, and signed off without the football field being able to be played on. So then we had to go back and spend how much money to rectify that and then put in a lighting project. Nothing against athletics, but that is not my first responsibility. And so seeing Deltona Middle moving its way down in the pay-as-you-go, where all of a sudden, where I'm not kidding you, in March on the pay-as-you-go, it was here, and now it's here, and it's all those things that have moved up. And as I said, nothing against athletics, nothing against. I understand things come up, but I feel, I'm going to be honest, I feel from yesterday's phone call, and I said it during the phone call, and I feel sitting here today, this is a presentation to push bonding, because the other two didn't work. And that's all I have to say.
Okay, fair enough. I want to weigh in a little bit at this point, if it's okay. I have to agree somewhat with what Jamie is saying in terms of how it appears. That it did seem like Deltona Middle School was further up on the schedule, and now if it's pay-as-you-go, it's pushed way down the road. So it appears that because there are so many projects out there, and you all know them way better than we, but obviously you can manipulate that in all sorts of ways to say, well, we got to do this first, this, and therefore we don't have enough money, and it's going to take us 2 or 3 more years to get that money. And for us lay people, maybe except for Ms. Wright, who is more connected to the construction industry than the rest of us, it just seems like, I'm not accusing anybody of anything, but it seems like you could make this work in any way that you may want it to work and just tell us that we have to do these projects and they're necessary and we gotta have the money, and this is all the money that we have, and so these gotta come first, and we only have X amount left, and we gotta have the 58 million in the bank before we can start Deltona Middle, and because of these other projects, it's gonna take us longer to acquire the 58 million to have it in the bank. On the other hand, if the board said, don't do any of the projects, save all the money for the Deltona Middle. Deltona Middle's first priority, everything else is on hold, sorry, everybody, this is where all the money's going, and we get there in a year or a year and a half, I don't know. But I'm just saying, and I'm not saying, just let me finish, I'm just saying that's how it can be perceived because of the dramatic difference in what was said 6 months ago, 4 months ago, into where we are now. Now, having said that, I have changed my mind on whether to pay as you go or to bond. And the reason for that is because of the low interest rate that we have right now, and because of the construction costs, which we don't have a crystal ball, we don't know what it's going to be 3 years from now, but certainly it's probably not going to go down, and I think we should take advantage of the borrowing opportunity that presents itself at this point. I would only be in favor of it on a 5-year payback. I can live with that. I am, and obviously Deltona Middle School would be the project. And if I can just diverge just a little bit, there's no relationship that I can see between our aging schools and academic achievement. Spruce Creek High School is our oldest school. What's the #1 high school? Spruce Creek High School. Tomoka Elementary is one of our oldest schools, 63, 68. A school. Ormond Beach Elementary School, 1928. A school. I mean, it doesn't go hand in hand. So we all know it's what's happening inside those walls and not maybe those walls themselves that make the difference. Deltona Middle School, great school, you know, and so our teachers out there and principals are doing amazing things, and it's not the age of the building that determines that. However, as I looked at your list, Sarah Lee, and I thank you for putting this out. It was interesting, actually, to see what years the schools were built and the last time they received any upgrades. I feel like when I looked at the information that went out to the public when we were rolling out the sales tax, remember we had our list of things that we were going to do, and it says here, I'm looking at it, replacement schools, elementary, Pearson, we've done it. Chisholm, almost finished. George Marks, getting started. Tomoka Elementary, nowhere to be seen. Deltona Middle, at least we're talking about it. I believe if we're going to bond some money, that Tomoka Elementary needs to be moved way up on this list. It was one that we featured in our
First five.
1, 2, 3, 4 schools, and the only middle school was Deltona Middle. And I know this can all change based on needs, but at least those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 schools, you know, they should be the ones that, gosh, we're going to be in 2020 here pretty soon. So we've had it for what, 3 years? 3 years of money. And so those schools, I mean, they should be they should be ready to, let's go, let's get these projects going. I know Tomoka Elementary is a complicated one, but gosh, we've dealt with complicated things so many times, whether it's Ormond Beach Middle School or George Marks with all the terrain issues, and Deltona Middle, I'm sure we'll have issues. Chisholm had, we always have issues. So I would just love to see Tomoka Elementary moved out. I would love to do the bond for a 5-year period, but I would like to include that school as soon as we can. I just think it's kind of what we said what we were going to do, and I think we should. I mean, we're almost there, but we just need to push it just a little bit further. I don't, because of my experience with the last 15-year Pride project that I lived through, and I see Tom Brown sitting there scratching his head already, sweat starting to come out on his forehead. I don't want to overburden the last thing, because we learned from the last time. Don't get too much on the plate, because they can't get it done. And we want quality stuff, of course. But I think just adding Tomoka is not going to be too much. Now, if I'm wrong, then somebody, tell me. But I think we could include that school in the 2021 design and get the thing going, because we are going to have to sit down while design's going on, talk to that community, where we're going to put the students, where we're going to build it. There's all those issues with that landlocked piece of property. And you were there, Ruben, so you know how difficult, and you've all been there, so you all know how awkward it is, the design of that school.
Mr. Persis?
Yes.
One of the
Ken.
things that really works with this 5-year program, if the Deltona Middle School, if we finance it and it gets built, say in the next 2 years, you still have enough useful life in your referenda. You could actually layer on top of this 5-year program, you'll have already repaid 2, maybe 3 years of it, do the Tomoka Elementary on a 5-year program just like this one. And so that school is built, you got 3 years remaining, layer Tomoka right on top of it, and you still have plenty of time left to finance other projects before your referenda expires.
You talking about referenda expiring, you mean the whole
Well,
15?
when the sales tax ends, 2031.
I think
yeah.
what Ken's trying to point out is there's additional potential borrowing capacity
Oh,
out
sure,
after the next
sure.
5 years.
I
You can see
understand.
when this brown line falls down, you could layer on another smaller financing if it was needed at that point in time to do another school, and still obviously have a very conservative bonding portfolio, as opposed to when you go out for the longer term, the debt service never drops off.
I understand that part. I just want it to happen sooner than that. Okay, so I don't want to wait to 2024 to get to
I
design.
don't think suggesting you have to do that. You could layer on another
Right.
financing, and you could amortize the principal out past when this one falls off. So you would only be incrementally increasing your debt service while this existing financing's outstanding. And we can run scenarios that would show what that would look like.
Take the next 12 to 18 months to design it, figure out what you're doing on the site, and then in 2022, 2020, right in there, put in Tomoka. You could do that, and you wouldn't be burdening facilities with building another school while you're getting Deltona Middle built.
No, and I don't want to delay Deltona Middle School.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to not delay Tomoka Elementary School. So if you all could figure out a way, Sarah Lee, now I'm looking at you. You're giving me a puzzled look. So tell me what's.
I gotta think.
Okay.
That's my
Well,
thinking.
Well, thinking's good. I'm not gonna, I want to interrupt your thinking, and I'll let the board comment about what I said, because if you all don't agree with me, you need to let me know. Ms. Cuthbert?
I too am in favor of bonding the 5-year plan. As I travel to schools and visit restrooms and visit offices, Working conditions are very important to not only to our students, but also to our faculty and staff. When paras get down on their knees, when kindergarten teachers get on their knees and the carpet is too old to support the knee, working conditions are extremely important. So I do not want to create the haves and have-nots, and I've said that before when it comes to building conditions. Athletics is very, very important to our schools, especially to high schools. It's very important to our parents and to our athletes. A lot of scholarships are tied into that. A lot of revenue is raised for schools by hosting their own athletic events. You talk to Mainland or to Seabreeze, you talk to Atlantic High School, when they have to travel and they have to go to the Daytona Stadium, it costs them money to travel for buses, and they don't get the revenue. The Daytona Stadium, it costs so much that the Mainland High School itself, and I think you know that they do not receive any revenue. As good as their football team is, they're not going to get revenue to increase their school. And when I was elected in 2014, the very first controversial issue I had was the Spruce Creek High School football boosters, and they wanted their own field and they wanted their own lighting. And I will never forget their enthusiasm for their own field, and they did not want to travel to the New Smyrna Stadium to play at all anymore, which I can understand their desire. My husband was an assistant principal at Deltona High School and in charge of the building of that field at that time. So, and how much the area people, the community, wanted that field for their Deltona residents. And they also have, who comes to play on their field? Is it University that came to play on the field?
Sometimes, yes.
Sometimes. So I think it's extremely important. The only thing I noticed is that some schools high schools got a little more funding than others did when it came to either lighting or repairs. I saw some of the inequity in the athletic spending over the last since 16. And I also think it's extremely important that we look at Spruce Creek High School. And it's going to be a very difficult task, as Mrs. Morrissey was speaking of. It is our oldest high school. The bathrooms are atrocious. The cafeteria can't even hold the Lego League Junior competition for our elementary schools, let alone their students trying to eat. And Deltona Middle is in desperate need of a replacement. And my thought of this meeting, the bonding issue to be presented is, the bonding issues come before us before, and you voted on last time. And I wanted to bond last time. And it's because it's urgent. Our schools need attention. We need resources directed to their campuses. When the HVAC breaks down at New Smyrna Middle, I mean, there is a lot of people very unhappy. Education stops when the air conditioning goes off. When New Smyrna Middle floods because the pipes are breaking in that porous soil, the pipes are breaking all the time, it needs to be replaced, and we need to have it. When the windows cannot be cleaned anymore because they are 35, 37 years old and they just can't be scraped clean again, it has an effect on learning. So I'm in favor of this 5-year payback time at this tiny little bit over 2% interest. And I do appreciate you bringing all this information to us. It's very clear, and it's interesting to see all of our viewpoints. And to address what Mrs. Wright was saying before, are we going to think in the long run over the next year or two about where our schools are placed as we look at shifting populations and what we should invest in, like what she suggested, Ortona and Osceola. And of course, in my district, my first thought goes to Reed Patillo. It is an aging school. Is it still viable? And I also wanted to make sure that we always have to address our communities. But also, there is some more younger people moving into our older neighborhoods. And I see that around the Reed Patillo area. So if we give it another couple of years, we may see some shifting of younger people moving into those neighborhoods. So time
Okay.
will tell.
Thank you, Ms.
Thank you.
Cuthbert. Mr. Cologne.
So Jamie, just to address what you said, and I went back and looked at the half-cent project list, and there is $15 million that was allocated for athletics, and we told the public that we would do that for track replacement and athletic fields. So I don't feel that we are prioritizing athletic fields over education because that money was allocated, the 15 million was allocated from the half cent just for that. So I truly don't feel that we are not spending, we're doing what we said we were going to do. I have a question on, so I realized he mentioned Tomoka. How did Osceola jump in front of Tomoka for a master plan? What was the thought process behind that?
Building conditions. The building conditions cannot, we've had 2 hurricanes, we've talked about the coastal location. It's an older school. Many of its buildings, not all, go back to the 50s and 60s. And it's a facility that has had many years of issues of moisture intrusion. And these last 2 hurricanes, we are bringing it forward because for many years, it's just, you know, some of the issues you're raising, Mrs. Wright, for many reasons, it's, well, let's wait. Well, let's wait. We cannot wait. We have got to do something to this school. And what we're proposing are 2 totally different things. We're saying we can correct the problem, and we spell out different projects that seek to do that. Or we can start looking at a bigger picture and follow through that way. That's 2 different philosophies. They have both come up from board comments. But the reason it is moved forward over Tomoka, because internally we talked about that, is because the building conditions warrant it.
And so elementary schools are typically, we talked about Pearson was somewhere around 18 or so. So I think there is room to move forward with both of the 2, both Osceola and Tomoka, you know, in a calculated time frame. I mean, it's a third of what Deltona Middle is going to cost. I mean, granted, the locations are challenging, and I know the gentleman back there is probably starting to sweat again.
Yeah, he's actually starting to twitch right now, too.
But again, at 20 million, and going back to your point, you know, as we start to, you know, we still have in our half-cent tax, there's still that buffer. And so 2 elementary schools, $40 million, you know, it'll be 20, we could probably knock those out responsibly in the next 8 years. I mean, replacing, yeah, because it's 5 years, and so if, let's say, we get to the bulk of each one of these in the next year, 2 and 3, I mean, it will still be 2027 before we're saying, okay, where else do we need to go? But until then, again, as I said before, we're talking about just putting a Band-Aid on these schools and spending $6 million, which is, you know, a third of the, half, well, not half the cost.
That
but-
was the comment the Project Oversight Committee made, was when they did exactly what you just said, Mr. Colon.
So I'd support, I mean, looking at a model which can put both schools, you know, for 2 reasons. Number 1, they both need it. And number 2, it's what we said we were going to do. And actually, I'll take it back. We said we were going to do Tomoka, but we need to do Osceola. And so, again, we're talking about elementary schools, not middle schools or high schools. And I think, you know, and I don't think I've ever been to Spruce Creek, but it sounds like Spruce Creek may end up being the next monster. as far as schools goes. And once that hits, there won't be a lot of room for much more with the existing half cent. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but, and I haven't been everywhere, so I've never been to Spruce Creek. I've only heard of their portable village.
It's a village.
Yeah, I'm sure. So anyways, that was my thought.
So can I ask a question?
Yeah, if
'Cause-
before you do, because I did not speak about Osceola when I was making my comments earlier, and they're both obviously in my district, and I visit those schools a lot. So there's no question that, and to your point, which is so right on, there is no need to have two schools on the beach side 2 miles apart. There's just no need. And my preference would be to build a new Osceola school. And maybe, here we thinking outside here, but maybe even a K-8 Osceola school. We do not have a middle school on the entire beach side. So all the middle school students go over the bridge. It's always been a problem whether they go to Campbell or to Ormond Beach Middle School
Or to New Smyrna.
or to New Smyrna. We're always shifting, and I don't have the remedy for New Smyrna because Coronado is just the only one, and you have to have at least one school on the beach side. You can't close Coronado. But I don't see why we have to have two schools 2 miles apart on the beach side, and particularly when one needs to be replaced, which is Osceola. I think it would actually become a magnet for families to want to attend that school. There are 2 private schools on the beach side that have children there for various reasons, but I think if we made a statement with a grand Osceola new elementary gifted academy, you know what I'm talking about. I think with the security first, 300 new employees coming in, most of them are going to be under 35. Going into there, they're going to be attracted or would be attracted to live on the beach side. And if we have the strong public school presence there, I think it would be a win for the beachside community, actually, maybe to revitalize it. So I definitely agree with Ms. Wright on that issue. I don't see why we can't address Osceola and Tomoka at the same time. Tomoka is just harder because of the land situation. I don't think Osceola would have quite those issues. But I would like to, I'm just speaking out loud and you guys chime in. But I would love to see staff come back if you can't do it right now, or maybe we can take a break, or you guys can put your pencil to it. But I would love to see what kind of a bond issue it would take in order to build those 3 schools, Osceola, Tomoka, and Deltona Middle. I also want to agree with Ms. Cuthbert on the issue of if we continue to allow parents, if we continue to depend on parents in the community to help us with our pavilions and playgrounds and those kinds of things, we are never going to achieve equity because the demographics from our schools vary so much. It's not fair, and we have to be fair. So, I think you said you're allocating $300,000 per year for the pavilions, $300,000 per year for the playgrounds. I think that number needs to be bumped up. we shouldn't have so many children in schools with pavilions and thousands of others without. It's just not right. I mean, we're talking about skin cancer and all the other, problems with just being hot, and I mean, it's just miserable. So all of our children ought to have the same types of outdoor facilities. Those aren't tremendously expensive. In regard to the lighting of the fields, I think that's another one, to Ms. Cuthbert's point. I know Ms. Wright feels that way about athletics. Sometimes that's the only reason why children come to school. I mean, athletics are a real draw, and they're a sense of pride. And whether you're on the girls' softball team or the baseball team or the football team, it doesn't matter. Parents love it when their child's out there, and they love it. Their peers love it. And so I think we really need to, again, have equity. That's all I'm saying, that we need to, as quickly as possible, get things equal amongst the district. Now, can I just shift gears just real quick? According to my figures, we get about, and Deb, you correct me if I'm wrong, 42 million about a year in sales tax.
Right, that's
Right.
our projection is
And we
just over.
get 6 million a year in impact fees.
Yes,
Right.
that's our projection.
And we get 59 million a year from our 1.5 we are projecting to get in FY20.
Yes, that's
Right.
correct.
So when you add that all up, that's $107 million a year, money coming in. And what I think it would be helpful for the board, and getting back to Jamie's point, is just like, where is this money going? I've got $107 million coming in. We know impact money can only be spent on growth, but then you have $100 million that we can spend it on basically what the board wants to spend it on. So I think that's what's important, and I don't know how much, I don't know how much we have in the bank right now. I mean, how much was the carryover from the previous year? We just have to be as transparent as possible with these numbers so that we can really understand, so we can make good decisions. And we can't make good decisions if we don't clearly understand how the money's being spent.
Well, our fund balance, the projection for fiscal year 19 for year end, the 45.3 million, which is it's here, but doesn't include all the restrictions. But the breakdown is we have about 14 million in LCIF, so that's the 1.5 mils. We have about 9.7 million in impact fees and about 18 million in sales tax. So sales tax, some of that is just a slight amount left from the bonding. We only have about 500,000 left from the $40 million bond.
Okay, Deb, so let me just stop you there.
Sure.
So we have about how much in the fund? Was it 45 or 40?
Right, I'm looking at a projection from
Okay.
another source, just
Okay.
that I have, but this projection shows 45 million. This one is showing at the end of fiscal year 20, 51 million. So I'm actually looking at fiscal year 19.
Okay. And of that 45, you said 9.7 was impact fee in the fund balance?
Okay, I have the fiscal year 20 broken down. So we have CO and DS, which we have to use to pay specific items, 1.6 million. LCIF, the projection is 19.6 million. State and local miscellaneous, 2.4 million. Impact fees, 2.4 million. And sales tax, 24.5 million. That adds up to the 50.5 million, 50.6.
So now you're saying that
That's at the end of fiscal year
you're 19 or fiscal year 20?
That would be, yeah, that's this 50 million. But that does include if we bond the 68 million.
So we'd have a $50 million fund balance at the end of FY '20 if we bonded. Are you using a 5-year bond of 75 million?
It would be 47 million without bonding. The pay-as-you-go is 47 million. So there's about a $3.5 million difference. And it's allocated differently too, because it depends on what projects are brought forward.
Okay, just so I want to make sure everyone's clear, because it gets murkier the more we talk about it. I want to make sure I understand. For FY '20, you said if we bonded $75 million for 5 years.
68 million.
68 million, okay, 68 million for 5 years, that we would end up with 47.5 million.
50.6 million if we bond.
50.6.
Yeah, it's the
Why
one. The
why
one
do
at
we
the
end
top
up
with
more
bond.
if we bond than if we pay as you go? I mean, unless I'm missing something.
Well, if, part of the reason is because if we don't bond, we have more left in impact fees. We would have 9 million in impact fees versus only 14 million left in the sales tax money.
Okay,
Because that's assuming we would use a lot of the sales tax money during fiscal year '20.
right.
But we wouldn't be using as much of impact fees, so it's distributed differently.
All right. So what I want to get at is so that I don't want to borrow money we don't need to borrow. I don't want to borrow money, more money than staff can get working right away. And yet I don't want that money to go away to other projects. In other words, these schools have got to get started, they got to get built. You know, they got to go, that you got to get them going. So when it comes to Deltona Middle, we sort of have a cost on that one now, so that's okay. Tomoka Elementary, we don't have any figures on that. Osceola, we don't have any figures. So, you know, we could not say right now what would be the prudent thing to do in terms of how much to borrow. If we want to, you know, borrow more than $68 million right now, or do we want to, you know, the board may decide, well, let's borrow $68 million today, and a year from now, borrow with $40 million. I mean, you know, but to your, and with your experience, you were both saying the interest rates are historically low right now.
I think there's two factors, one financial and one legal, and
Okay.
can chime in as well. I mean, if you're gonna borrow money, you know, it's historically low interest rates, 2% for 5 years, 2.20 for 12 years. I mean, you know, I'm not gonna say rates can't go lower, but there's a lot of things going on in the global economy. There's this little election that's gonna happen in 2020, and who knows
That's what
what's
I
gonna
hear,
happen with
yeah.
that. So, I mean, the markets are just very volatile. And it's been volatile in a flight to quality aspect. Stock market's been getting hammered. Usually means treasuries are going lower because people are getting out of their stock portfolios and buying safer treasuries because all the trade war stuff. So yes, from a financial perspective, it's a great time to be borrowing, but you also, from a legal perspective, have to keep in mind that you also have to have an expectation to spend tax-exempt bond proceeds within a specific period of time once you borrow them, and that's generally within 3 years. So the IRS doesn't want you going out and borrowing a bunch of money that you can't spend for 4 or 5 years. So you know, that's something we have to keep in mind as well. You can't just say, rates are great now, we're just gonna borrow all this money.
No,
Because quite frankly,
no.
you can invest the money at the borrowing rate and not spend it for 5, 6 years. So
Right, right. And you actually anticipated my next question, which was the money that we have in the bank, where are we investing that money until we need it?
yeah, so when you issue these bond proceeds, if you draw down $68 million from day one at 2%, you're actually in a very unique circumstance, which we haven't seen probably in the last 10 years, is where you'll be earning positive arbitrage on those funds. So the yield
Explain what that means.
I'm in the weeds big
I
time.
know,
We got
I
in the
know.
weeds a little bit with bond premiums. We have an inverted yield curve right now. Short-term rates are higher than long-term rates. So you can borrow for 5 years at 2%. And when Deb and her group goes and invests those proceeds, they're probably earning about 2.5% now. So you're actually earning more than what you're borrowing for. So there's no cost to having those funds in the bank while they're being spent.
Okay.
Having said that, there is an expectation that the Federal Reserve will be cutting interest rates this year. So that investment rate could come down.
Right.
The IRS is going to make you rebate that positive arbitrage back if you don't spend your proceeds quick enough. But yes.
Quick enough meaning what?
3 years.
That 3 year that you were talking?
No.
No?
For construction projects,
Yes.
you have to spend them, it's a percentage within, it's a 2-year construction window, okay? It's basically 25% the first 6 months, 50% within
Got
a year. So you gotta hit those bogeys.
You got it.
Now, the good news is, you can keep as much as you pay. So,
If you pay 2%, you can keep 2%.
Right.
Ah,
So if you make 2.5% and don't hit those bogeys,
then you got to give
you
it.
just give back the half
Half
percent or
percent.
whatever you beat.
Got it.
So make as much as you can. We, basically, you'll monitor.
You hire an arbitrage rebate consultant. that will-
I see.
You'll
Okay.
keep what you can keep, and you give back what you have to give back. So don't let the tax issues distract you in any way, shape, or form. But you, as Jay points out, you will be earning what you pay until you use the money. So
And-
just to clarify
But
one
Jay,
thing.
but
Yeah.
that's not just for the money that we would be bonding. We could do that with the money we have right
The
now.
other money would be unrestricted in
Right.
what you can earn on it. So there's no, it's just
Okay.
tax exempt bond proceeds. So there's 2 things, just to clarify, and I know this is way in the weeds. You have to have an expectation to spend the money within 3 years. In order to keep positive arbitrage, you have a 2-year requirement to spend all the money and hit certain bogeys. So
Yeah.
really, when you look at the borrowing, what I think you should focus on is, can you spend the money in 3 years? If you can spend it in 2 years and meet your bogeys, all the better. If not, you just have to rebate anything above and beyond the borrowing rate to the IRS. So it doesn't cost you anything.
I get it. Board members, questions on that? Go ahead. Ms.
Then the
Cuthbert,
next
then Ms.
question
Wright.
is, we need to know what our district can handle.
Right, you basically need to know what is, how much time does it take to design, how much time it takes to,
Takes a while.
basically, but Deltona Middle's already designed, correct?
Yes.
You're ready to go, that money,
But
We're finalizing DDs, design development. We're going to go into CDs, hopefully in July. I just want to clarify, you say we're ready to go. We're ready to go next year, next
Well,
calendar year,
yeah.
next fiscal year. We're ready to go. But we still have to do construction documents.
Right, and what that means is,
Can, just hold on one second. We got to clarify, because this is important, Sarah Lee, because we keep pushing dates around. So we're ready to go next fiscal year.
Oh, yeah.
Like July, between July and December, we're good to go.
if you're
When
in
you said
CD,
fiscal, I am saying,
I want a date.
Well, I'm just saying, the first 6 months of the next fiscal year, or you,
are this calendar year, 2019. No, I'm saying first 6 months of 2020,
of
which
FY20.
is your fiscal year 20.
yeah. So
I'm saying definitely your fiscal year.
Yeah, I'm
definitely-
saying, why couldn't it be starting before December of 2020?
I don't think we're gonna be ready. I mean, the original calendar had us being ready for February. We'd have to start bidding. If we were gonna go out and put shovels in the ground in December, those documents need to be done because we need to be bidding in the next couple months. Those documents, the construction documents, have not started. They are not scheduled to start till this summer. And you need time. The presentation we gave you in January had us starting in February of 2020, which is your fiscal year. So,
Well,
I'm just saying, that's our schedule.
So, does that mean that, from what you've all been telling me, is you gotta have the money in the bank before you can, go out to bid? Or before the project?
Before you
sign the
contract.
contract. Well, that's, according to you, that could be 5 months away.
Yeah, they were,
Yeah,
I
all
mean,
these borrowing scenarios assumed
Yeah.
in October of 2019
Right.
borrowing. So, I mean, there's a period of time, and we're not necessarily saying it has to be that day, but that's what
Right.
we use for assumption.
but the
Right.
reason they used that assumption
Okay,
was because of the schedule for Deltona Middle.
okay,
Right,
Because
that was
then
based on.
We'd be able to bring the contract forward to the board
yeah.
and have the money in the bank. So,
And I think, again, it goes back to what they were just talking about, the arbitrage and what we can earn versus what we're paying, that we don't have to be too concerned about the fact that we're borrowing a little bit before we're actually signing the contracts. But we do have to have that money in the bank, and I think it's probably, a 3-month window
about
to
3
kind
months to
of
get
get through
financing
that whole
together.
financing piece.
Okay, yes, Ms. Haynes,
Okay, so February 2020 was the date we were talking about. We're now talking about borrowing money in October, which that's 4 or 5 months, depending on how you look at it. But then I just heard you say, well, we could be looking at 6 months starting in January, which would mean now we're moving to June. So I really, because if you want to change how I'm going to vote, I really need some more specific dates. I'm sorry, but I don't deal in vague of, oh, we borrowed the money in October, we said we were going to start in February, but no, now we're starting in June, or now it's August or whatever, and we've had this money sitting there, and I understand we need the money. And I want to clarify something. I know, and I knew when the sales tax went out, that yes, athletics was included. My biggest concern today, and I said it yesterday, is what got moved around to back Deltona Middle up, because Deltona Middle was going to start next year in February, and if we don't bond, the scare tactics are, well, we're waiting 3 more years. But I'm looking at, even if we're bonding and we're looking at borrowing money in October, I want to know when we're really going to start on Deltona Middle, because I don't want to be here February and it's like, no, we're starting June. In June, we're starting August. And now we're a year into bonding, and we won't have met the bogeys for the 2 years, because we will have borrowed the money and not met the first quarter, not met the first half, not met the third quarter. So I need clearer information. This kind of like just trust. I'm not good when we're talking millions of dollars in trust.
We can bring back to the board a complete construction schedule in all of these major projects. Architects can give you exact timelines for DDs, design drawings. With design drawings, once they're approved, you go to CDs, construction drawings. And then once construction drawings are approved, you submit those out to bid. You usually give your bidders 30, 45 days to bid and then that comes back and you sign your GMP, guaranteed maximum price contract, based on the bids that have come back.
And Ken, so it's at that point, when you're about to sign the contract, before you sign, you gotta have the money.
Correct. And just for the record, I mean, we use 10/1/19 as the bogey date for running an analysis. We could have used November, we could have used January. I think the actual timing of the financing, which will come back before you all again. I think today we're looking for some consensus,
Yeah.
but a resolution will come back before you actually authorizing this debt. So there'll be another chance to visit this.
Sure.
You know, the timing of the actual financing would be based on that schedule. So, you know, we're very cognizant of that. So I think, we're not locking in today on a 10/1/19 borrowing date. I think the further you delay that borrowing, obviously you're going to pay less interest. But you're also going to subject yourself to potentially higher borrowing rates. So that's the thing, as your financial
Sure.
advisor, and we have a fiduciary relationship with the district. We represent you all to get you the best financial deal we can get you, is to work within all those parameters and present to you what we think is the best deal. We don't have a crystal ball. If I did, I tell people I certainly wouldn't be sitting here and I wouldn't have been on the phone 5 times yesterday because I'd be independently wealthy. But with what information we have, we try to present you a deal that will get you the best financial profile. And the timing of that will change based on certain factors.
Okay, I have 2 questions I know about. Ms. Wright?
Can I just say one thing real quick before to piggyback on that is, as Jay said, the 10/1 is just what we talked about when initially the February date. And even if we weren't going to start until July 1st of 2020, we'd still have to borrow in next fiscal year to have that money in the bank to sign the contracts. Okay, so we could, we're putting this, if we put this $68 million in there, it would be in there saying we could borrow right up until June 30th of 2020. Next fiscal year is next fiscal year. The 10/1 is just an example based on a February start date.
Okay, Ms. Wright?
Okay, I want to make a comment, but then I
Yes,
have a
go-
question
go
for
ahead,
you.
go.
But I think the concern is if we were able to do whatever we were supposed to do in February, I don't think borrowing the money should prevent us from moving forward with whatever we had planned for February. Am I correct? Okay, so what I would like to say to you,
Yeah.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
in hearing all of this, so I agree with all that said. I would like to recommend that we go ahead and give them some directives on the 3 schools we've listed, Deltona, Tomoka, and Osceola, and potentially looking at Osceola as a K-8. I think that is a great idea because I remember they used to have a junior high school over there.
Yeah?
And so look at that as potentially a K-8, but get us the complete construction for all of them.
Yep.
So we will know what we need to borrow. And in that, if our chief financial officer can kind of really break out where the money is being allocated and if it's some gaps, because then we'll know what we have to spend towards these projects and
Yeah.
what we really need to borrow. And so that we can, and a list of what you know need to be done, be it fields. We know we have to do technology because that's something we have allocated every year. So we know we have to have earmarked for the 101 with our students. There are certain things we have to, and do be cognitive because we are very hot and we may have a real active hurricane season. And so with all of that being said, what do we need to spend in your area for this year? And what do we need to get those projects done? And then where can we pull
Yeah.
from our half cents and our impact fees, where if it is 100, and I just ran numbers based on Deltona, even if we looked at a K-8, it's still about $140 million over the next 3 years. Can your department do it? And I think that's where you have to tell us, we can't do it, or we can do these two, because again, that will depend on what this board will agree upon.
Well said, Ms. Wright. And Mr. Cologne first, and then I'll get to you, Ms. Cuthbert.
So my understanding was when the board decided not to bond the last time, we were going on a pay-as-you-go. And we voted on earlier this year to go ahead and proceed with design and so on. So how far behind are we from where we initially projected we would be had the board borrowed that $150 million? Because my understanding was we were still on track because, it's still only the little bits at a time. And so When did we intend initially, when you all came to the board last year with the 150 million, when did we think a shovel would be in the ground?
The February.
Of next year? So we're still on the date for where we initially?
That's our desired date.
That was the
All
date.
those comments I made to you early about the issues we're encountering are the only reason that would change. The team's goal is to stay on schedule.
And that was initially supposed to be February, so we're still on track for now. Okay.
Thank you for asking the question. Yeah, Ms. Cuthbert?
Okay, I just wanted to clarify something. When you suggested a K through 8 for Osceola to rebuild it, are you also asking for Ortona to join Osceola?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted, that's what I thought. I just wanted to make sure it was clear and stated. Okay.
Yeah. And again, when we say things like that, obviously, we need to talk about it more and discuss it and all those things, but it just seems, practically speaking, we've said it 2 or 3 times now, 2 miles, and I know everyone loves their school. You know, Reed Patillo, what happened when we thought it'd be wise to go to Chisholm. Every community loves their school, and there's a long history at Ortona Elementary School. And it's a
what
great
this is all
school,
about.
and all of that, but operationally, to be as efficient as we can be, if you were designing the schools right now, you wouldn't have those 2 schools that close together. It just doesn't make sense. But getting back to Ms. Wright's point, because I don't want to lose all that, and that was, what can you tackle? What can you accomplish in 3 years? That's what we got to know. And then definitely do what Ken said, present that to the board, the entire schedules of everything, so we can see it and not have a misunderstanding of when things are going to start and how long they take. And
Sure.
Okay, that'd be very helpful to us. Further comments, Ms. Cuthbert, Ms. Cologne, Ms. Haynes, yes.
I want to thank you for this sheet too, but I want to clarify one thing. Would all of you look at DeLand High, please?
I'm sorry,
that?
didn't hear
Look
you.
at DeLand High. DeLand High is actually our oldest high school. So we keep talking about, I'm just saying, and
My schools are old. They all need
your
replacement.
schools are not old, so stop.
But the Lynn High has had some work done. I think they finished around
I'm not putting
2003.
anything on the table, but I love your sheet. But if we're gonna look at the sheet, let's get it right.
Let's get it right. I certainly agree. I agree with that. Ms. Mueller, Jay, Ken, Sarah, you have any questions for us? Or do we, is it pretty clear?
Yes.
Yes? Deb, yes? Yes?
Yes.
Yes, yes. All right, then let's end it right there, and we'll take a break for lunch. Thank you.
What time do we convene?
Do we need to come back after lunch to further
Well,
this
let's
conversation?
ask the board. Let's ask the board members, do you want them to come back, or do you want, unless you can present new information after lunch that you don't?
Okay, so no.
All right, great. So then you guys are free.
Yeah.
Guys are free.
Thank you.
And then, I don't know, say 1:30?
Oh, okay.
1:30, let's plan on 1:30. If that should change a great deal, I'll
Well,
let
no,
you guys know.
we only have one or 2 minutes, right?
Yeah, is it,
Okay, but that's the same document. It's the same thing we already just